Greetings, everybody. Scott Stevens here as we dive on into a brand new week, this last week of October 2020. Kind of anticipated to be kind of a tumultuous October. Financially, not as bad as I was anticipating. We're just a week out from the election. We will be election eve when we talk to you next Monday, and some 50 to 63 million Americans have already gone to the ballot. And now the stories are showing up. How do I change my vote? Maybe this is why the Constitution allowed for one day to vote. We'll see where we hit this topic in a few days' time, or let's just say Wednesday next week. All right, I'm going to dive into something that I've always enjoyed talking about, and that is the opportunities, the trepidations, the excitement, a little bit of anxiety about disclosure. And in the 50 plus years of my life, I have always mostly associated disclosure in dealing with UFOs. UFOs, that was the thing. Being an outdoor guy, a guy who likes to look at the skies, was most curious about. I also have that aviation thing in me. So, look at the sky and I'm like, that's a plane? Oh, that's definitely not a plane. So you are curious when you're looking at some bogey in the sky as to whose is it? What is it? What can it do that we are not capable of doing within the realm of accepted technologies that man has? So I've looked at disclosure from that point of view, that of being mainly to deal with UFOs. So let's roll on in here. Let's start this baby up. Disclosure cometh. And in many ways, it is a trickle kind of affair where it's an aspect of Chinese torture where you got one drop and okay, I can deal with that. And then another drop happens. And so there's just this little bit by little bit as we roll out technologies like the cell phone, like maybe the barcode turned QR code. Maybe it's in GMO foods. All of these things, these technologies could have been delivered from above or below. I suppose space could go in both vectors, up and down. And that's and I'll just say this, that there's a lot of topics that we'll hit next Wednesday. And if we're not done on Wednesday, then we'll push it on into next Monday. But disclosure cometh. Will not believe just how many lies have been told us and sustained across the generation. And as I look at the word apocalypse, that always meant disaster, Hollywood movie. But apocalypse, if we look at the definition, is somewhat more exciting. In the meantime, you can connect with me at metadimedigitalco.com with another perspective as the podcast, and there's the Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram connection. So all my life, I've waited for the date, the time, and the excitement of disclosure to occur. During my younger years, I was almost entirely focused on the disclosure of UFOs and what else would go with them? Aliens of some sort. If they're time travelers, fascinating. If they're not, and just from a great distance away, because they can move faster than light, then in a way, they're already time travelers. So I was almost entirely focused on the disclosure of UFOs and aliens. But as my research continued across many other disciplines, it became clear that we are not told more than what we are told, meaning almost every topic has a huge, huge library of this is what we will withhold from the people. So this has led me to view with deep skepticism almost everything that is presented by the hashtag MSM, the mainstream media. And the mainstream media is one of the most important gatekeepers of information. And therefore, the mainstream media helps or inhibits our ability to develop an accurate worldview. And I just have this sense that there is a massive data dump that is close. And once this dump arrives, many of my earlier shows will have a greater context for assisting in shifting one's worldview to more accurately represent what is really happening out in the world today. We've talked about cognitive dissonance. We've talked about the alchemy of pain and how we change and evolve and move through unfamiliar thought patterns, painful thought patterns, into something that is more supportive of integrating into the world, or even just a healthier relationship with your spouse. So there's just a wealth of information that's buried in shows that we have done in the past that will relate to what is immediately ahead. And so I'll kind of pose this question: what in your reality will you fight to hold on to versus letting go of gracefully? As we will be poised with a blizzard of information that is contrary to how we view the world. What bit of information or what barrage of data, of experiences that others have had that will be shared, will you hold on to, even though it is contrary to the new information coming in? All right, let's go to Wikipedia, because let's see what they say about discovery. It applies to law, science, technology, and finance. Discovery in law, simply a pretrial phase where parties to the case obtain evidence from each other and then share. Convention of disclosure, convention that all materials and facts must be disclosed in financial statements. If you're going to go buy a house, you want to know what that house has been through, what has happened to it. Where am I stepping into? What kind of a situation am I stepping in? Is it in a floodplain? Is it at fire risk? Has it had other structural damage that I need to be aware of so I can have proper disclosure to make a correct view of the expense of the commitment I'm going to make to that home? Prospectus: what am I investing in? What kind of instruments will I be buying? Key disclosure laws, legislation that requires individuals to surrender cryptographic keys to law enforcement, and then disclosure widgets. And then the other one, which was separated from all of them, disclosure and ufology, the revelation of suppressed evidence of ET life by the U.S. government or other world governments. And we even look disclosure further and in use as a noun. There's that lovely word apocalypse, expose, exposure, revelation. Two of them kind of have religious overtones, and the others almost tabloidous with their verbiage. Who's seen the X-Files? How many of you have seen the X-Files? This was a Mully and Scully and Mulder. I want to believe this was the poster that was up in his FBI office as he was brought in to investigate those files, which do not fit in to many other stories. Where we got to give the freak the opportunity to investigate these incidences, because he is of the mindset where he is more investigative, he's less judgmental, and therefore able to assimilate the data, the story that is being presented, so we can come to a conclusion. Do we advance this into the next category of the FBI, or do we just let it go sit in a blue book file, kind of disappeared off to the side? So the coming disclosure, ready or not, it appears that it's close. We saw the Navy, we saw the CIA, the National Reconnaissance Office allow sailors, other soldiers, part of the Navy, talk about openly an incident that the Navy dealt with back in 2004. They have released the gun sight video, the surveillance video from the aircraft, and even the comms between the aircraft and the aircraft carriers. So whether we like it or not, we are beginning to move into a zone where this disclosure will meet us in the face. Something not from this world. And this was the USS Nimitz pilot David Fravor discussed. So once again, get ready, get informed, because the last thing you want to deal with is cognitive dissonance, where information comes into your sphere of being that you're not ready to process. This president, despite garnering great howls of laughter, pressed ahead and created a U.S. Space Force. A year after this was done, it became clear as to why there was such resistance to creating this branch, this division within the Air Force itself. It's that if you have space supremacy, the Navy on the surface becomes less relevant. Their budget is going to be reduced. You don't need the Army, because you could then deliver Marines on a beach repeatedly from a different delivery vehicle, different delivery mechanism. So there were entrenched interests that did not want to see the little boy show up, the Space Force show up, because it would have impinged on their budgets and their perceived turf. It was a turf war that kept that in the news in let's just say, a negative light. All right, these are topics that I've associated or would like to see surround disclosure. UFO, straight up, the Disclosure Project being one of those, and this has been running since the early '90s. Stephen Greer, and this is how I came to the Disclosure Project. Is I was interested in free energy. Where can humanity find the power to power the energy to power our future? Are we stuck with petroleum? Were we stuck with oil from whales a century or 2 centuries ago? We had to progress from that very large being with a great vast reservoir of oil to the planet being the vast reservoir of oil. And now that humanity is deep into the 7 billion population, we need to be able to tap a different reservoir of energy, a different sustainable energy. And this is where I was going, just passing the 2000, crossing into the new century, when I came across geoengineering and the weather plane. So the Disclosure Project. And I believe, and my understanding of this is that disclosure would bring light to anti-gravity technology, time dilation, and FTL travel faster than light, and more than likely a more factual history of the human race. Do you believe, despite the weathering that is evident on monuments, that man truly emerged 5000 BC? That just fragments of humankind, the Clovis man, and the little smatterings in Africa and Australia and in Asia, that was the beginnings, despite mountains of evidence and artifacts to support that we have been here far, far longer, and that man has endured catastrophic events over and over and over again. So if we were to have access to outer space, to other races of beings, which might be more willing to share a true history of what they know of mankind. So what and who are we as spiritual beings? That would give us a little more context of what our potentials are. Because then we would look at religions, and this is one of the things that the Billy Myers interactions with those aliens said, is there is no truthful religion on this planet. It does not exist. You don't know why you're here. You don't know what you're doing here. And you have no idea where you go when you leave this physical vessel. And we would like to share that information with you. But what would happen to the power structures that maintain the rigidity of religion? And is religion useful for controlling the masses and even creating conflict upon which wars can be fought time and time again? Access to free energy and access to space. We could transmit from Earth to Mars very, very quickly. It would bring access to portals and time travel, and then disclosure as to why has these secrets been held so tightly and for so long. We don't have to go very far back. And these are pictures that have worked their way into the public domain. They were highly classified at the time in the 50s, but today it's almost nonchalant that we have had access to fascinating technologies, the ability to go places that we have never been, and that only fantasy shows like Stargate, SG-1, Star Trek, Earth, Final Conflict, all of these shows are kind of slowly bringing us there a bit at a time. So as we begin to wonder, can we, might we, have we, are we capable of utilizing these technologies? Einstein was once asked how he felt to be the smartest man alive, and he replied, "I don't know. You'll have to ask Nikola Tesla." What a fascinating man. And he stated all people everywhere should have free energy sources. Electric power is everywhere, present in unlimited quantities, and can drive the world's machinery without the need for coal, oil, and gas. So why are we in such a tizzy about oil and carbon dioxide? when this has been precedent with what this man brought humanity 70 plus years ago. Nikola Tesla was not in this for the money. He wanted to give the world free energy. If he were to implement free energy in the tradition of Nikola Tesla, then we would need to replicate not only his science, but then the humanity associated with it. The man is fascinating. The confluence of people, of entities that were surrounding him because they knew of the brilliance. They knew the man had a gift. But where did that gift come from? On a soul basis or something else? There's a curious document that I found, and it was in some of his paperwork that was scooped up or discussed that scooping up of his data after he passed. Margaret Storm had been assigned to certain work with the space people as follows. She's writing a book, and it was titled The Return of the Dove, a story of the life of Nikola Tesla, the scientist, and the part of his invention will play in this coming new age. Much of the data for the book has been supplied to Mrs. Storm through the transcripts received on the Tesla set, a radio-type machine invented by Tesla in 1938 for what was termed interplanetary communication. Tesla died in 1943, and his engineers did not build the Tesla set until after his death. It was placed in operation in 1950, and since that time, the Tesla engineers have been in close contact with spaceships. The space people had visited Tesla engineers many times and have told us that Tesla was a Venusian, brought to this planet as a baby in 1856 and left with Mr. and Mrs. Tesla in a remote mountain village, a province in what we call Yugoslavia. Ultimately, it was Serbia. So there's kind of a curious beginnings to that man that I did not know until I began this research. So the FBI's archive on Nikola Tesla is extensive. A good portion of it has been released to the public and has been out in the public for the better part of 40 years. It says his only military invention, and I find that hard to believe, was a method to which he alluded but never fully described. And that's the sign of a brilliant man protecting his intellectual property. This invention was a means whereby an impenetrable wall of force could be erected around the United States borders, which would render helpless any military attack. Tesla disclosed the existence of his plan in 1934 and stated that he intended to present it to the Geneva Conference, but seldom referred to it afterward. This invention was a means whereby an impenetrable wall of force could be erected around the United States borders. And that's just that aspect. These towers were developed specifically to send a frequency, a waveguide around the surface of the planet, and with that, supply actionable, usable, safe electricity to everyone without the need for copper or aluminum wire. This was his deepest desire, is to leave that print, leave that gift to mankind, that we did not have to go down the road that we did with the whales and nearly slaughtering them just for their oils, as we are now doing to the earth with great destruction just to harvest her oils. So the truth about the mystery Tesla Tower in Texas. This is curious. So that tower, it was developed in and around the Colorado Springs area before the turn of the previous century. It was ultimately dismantled as J.P. Morgan withdrew funding because he came to understand that there would be no meter, no power meter to regulate, register, and then charge the person at the other end for their use of this electricity. What they eventually went with was Edison. And Edison and the power meter is where we have been. We've been slowly, in many ways, bled dry month after month after month for the privilege of using electricity. So Michael Taylor, a Visiv Technologies representative who spoke to Central Texas News Now, has trusted us his pitch down pat. No need for tinfoil hats around the Visiv tower because it's just like a good old TV or cell phone tower. Perfectly harmless. Move along now. There's nothing here to see. So what it does is it creates a xenic surface wave, which is an electromagnetic wave that uses the surface of the Earth as a waveguide, enabling it to carry communication signals or electrical power efficiently over long distances. This wireless power system will employ a transmitter probe located near a power generation plant. To launch this Xenic carrier wave, receiver antenna will be positioned appropriately around the world to receive the signal and then download the power into a local microgrid, or, if you want to, a conventional grid structure. The wave is impervious to weather effects such as lightning or a geomagnetic disturbance or an electromagnetic pulse, those including and associated with nuclear detonation. Unlike a wired grid that we're using today, the Xenic wave cannot be physically attacked, or cyber attacks would be challenged to target or to cause a cascading failure within this wireless system. When launched, the Xenic surface wave initially envelops the planet like a balloon, enabling the transmitter probes to be placed anywhere the power can be generated and receivers placed anywhere where power is needed. What else this thing can do is to deal with communications signals. What is the tech that is now being rolled out aggressively that a lot of people are terribly concerned about? We have the option to not deploy 4G or 5G, that we can go with this much older and probably proven technology. It's proven enough that they didn't want to deploy it. So as we look through the FBI, the Department of Justice in D.C. back in 1943, there was definitely the need to get into Tesla's house after he passed in his apartment in New York City. He passed away on January 7th of 43, understood that the War Department was interested in this matter and that apparently the Alien Property Custodian's Office was taking some attention. He desired to know whether the Bureau would take some steps to refrain the relatives of Tesla from taking the contents of his trunks and whether the Bureau would seize the possessions of the trunks. Dr. Smith indicated that he was talking to the alien property custodians along those same lines. So what they needed to do was to get his journals, his paperwork, his partially constructed ideas and drawings and so forth. Notice this gentleman. Notice this gentleman, because there's a very curious tie-in to him. All right. The day science begins to study non-physical phenomena. It will make more progress in 1 decade than all the previous centuries of its existence. As I burst onto the weather modification scene, the question that I was posed so often in 2004, 2005 is, how can it be done? We have this law of thermodynamics. If you cannot create heat, then how can we juice up thunderstorms? How can we steer and guide hurricanes or create tornadoes? And it's because they're using non-physical phenomena. The physical world, the physical creation, is simply the bottom of a massive triangle that resides above it, where energy is so dense, so powerful, and down here it is so slow and so not energetic that it has become solid. The comparison is water to ice. We are essentially carbon, nitrogen, oxygen, calcium condensed into ice forms. So slow and so dense. And the man, Nikola Tesla, brilliant enough that he could see how the weapons could be so fantastic that a machine could be built, maybe like what we've seen with the results of Mars, that the machine would end war. We would realize that to continue on this path is simply too dangerous. So who was this man? And this is where we get very curious. John Trump is his name. This gentleman right here, Donald J. Trump's uncle, and potentially Julian Assange. Are they lookalikes, or are they just the same guy displaced by missions deployed across time? And I'm asking, might this finally be the point when so many earth-changing, even civilization-changing technologies will finally be brought to the forefront of humanity's consciousness and potentially adopted? Will we finally see that, no, we don't need to do things that way. We have this new tech, this new way. What deadwood needs to be cleared away? What old systems, old processes, old belief structures that we have all carried need to be cleared away, finally allowing us to take part and take advantage of what appears to be magic. Remember, Arthur C. Clarke said any sufficiently advanced technology is indistinguishable from magic. 3 theories of time travel. Another aspect of disclosure. A fixed timeline. Even when parties travel back in time, the future they left cannot be changed. All events remain as fixed points in time. The actions of the traveler in the past have already become part of history. This is known as a Novik's self-consistent principle. For example, say you travel back in time in order to kill Adolf Hitler as a baby. And in order to prevent World War II, you replace him with an orphan baby so that the family will not notice. You travel back to the future and replace the baby, grows up to become Adolf Hitler himself. You can't change it. You can view it. You can put in ripples, but there are guardrails, guidelines, fates, destinies that have to be lived out. A dynamic timeline alters events in the past have definite impacts on the present. For example, you travel back in time and you kill your grandfather. You also prevent your own birth and your own eventual trip back in time. In turn, your grandfather is never killed, and you are born again only to go back to try and kill your grandfather anyway. This loop continues infinitely and creates a paradox. And then there's the concept of a multiverse, where we have alternate timelines supported within the multiverse. An infinite number of parallel universes traveling in the past causes a new divergent timeline from the first one that was altered by the traveler. Because of this, the traveler can do anything with impunity, and only the new timeline will be affected, meaning a tapestry has been formed that decisions, those actions you have created, branch off, and you're in your own timeline. For example, if you travel back in time and kill all your grandparents, nothing happens. There is no paradox. You have simply created a new timeline in which you will not exist, but the original timeline is unaffected. However, you cannot return to your original timeline because you don't exist in that time. So 2020, the year of the weird, and will all the timelines finally converge? So we can't know about these options. We can't know about the potential that we have, that every single moment of time resides an opportunity to make a decision to know, a decision to ignore, a decision to get involved, a decision to sit still. Just one more, girl, and you'll be safe. The other interesting topic is human cloning. This is a cover of Time magazine from, I think, 2 decades ago, the better part of that. And the Chinese, this article now 5 years ago nearly, the attack of the clones, just isn't the latest in a terrible of the 3 Star Wars prequels. It could also be the motto of China's Boya Life Group, a company that is planning to open a human cloning factory in time for Conway's presidential run. Well, we know that didn't happen. Boya Life is reportedly 7 months away from completing construction on a huge plant at the Chinese port city that could crank out 1 million cloned cows by 2020. Sure, you start with the cows, but chief executive said that he's also planning to move on to thoroughbred racehorses, police dogs, and along with a South Korean partner, improved primate clones for use in disease research. What rights do these biological entities have? Are they, because they are created by a man, do they have those same inalienable rights as a natural born human being? What animates them? Does a soul show up and say, I want that opportunity. I'll take that experience. I know it won't be easy. It'll be difficult, but I'll take it. Or is it only darker energies that are hungry to re-express themselves back in the physical because they had such fun last time? What is going to show up to inhabit these bodies? Another topic approaching disclosure, our beautiful sun. We look over the last 9 years of the sun, and you can see year after year after year how the sun is beginning to quiet down. Less magnetic activity, a lot more auroral activity, as we looked at today on today's weather show. The aurora is lit up North and South Pole. As we enter this cycle, this probably 200-year or so cycle, initiated first by a solar slowdown, likely followed on with volcanic action, just sets the stage as it has in centuries past. So, new bases and push for polar resources. The president orders a plan for the Arctic and Antarctic in 60 days, and they have ordered the construction of a fleet of new icebreakers and bases to pursue U.S. interests in the Arctic and Antarctic. Right now, while it's open, but likely to be reglaciated as the sun does its things. What about underground? This is not new technology. We have these drilling bits, these massive nuclear-powered boring machines, and we don't hear anything about this. When Donald Rumsfeld, the day before 9/11, exclaimed that the Pentagon had lost nearly $2.5 trillion, where did that money go? What was it spent on? What is in the budget but isn't visible to the accounting people? And so look at this. We have an example at Colorado Springs and the NORAD base. That truly just the beginning. And if we want to go way back and look at Atlantean times before the previous inundation, they were an underground civilization. They knew to be underground ensured a greater level of safety, a greater continuity of civilization when those inundation events happen. My question is, how much of it survived the previous inundation? How much of it has been rebuilt? And what cooperations do we have with those races of beings? And there are probably several of them down there inside this planet. And as we see the sun wind down, are artist depictions like this of homes under bubbles more for exploration of other planets, or are we just leading people on a slow Chinese torture kind of disclosure as to where humanity will be in a few short decades? Now, we all know a great reset is coming. This is something we have talked about multiple times. And when it's on the cover of Time magazine, when it was on the cover of The Economist, as we looked at last Wednesday, we know the event draws closer. Introducing the Great Reset, world leaders introduce or will show us a radical plan to transform the economy. Transform it from what and into what? And it appears in many ways COVID is being the prelude to slowing the economy down, throwing away non-essentials. I was just looking at an article where going into Wales, that those people don't even have access. Well, let's just say the list of non-essential items versus essential items in a grocery store or a supermarket. Essential, non-essential. There's very few things that folks are allowed to purchase regardless of whether they need them or not. And it looks like a lot of it has to do with imports versus local manufacturing. So we have COVID back up. It's in the news. It's all over. The hospitals are full. But what is curious is that the death rate is nearly flat. We had a bump last spring, but either the medical system is capable of dealing with it right now. We have enough knowledge of how to treat this, whether it's accepted treatments or not. When someone's in need, we tend to be in need. Something else that is a little bit of a red flag for me is that right now, flu cases are nearly flatlined, whereas last year we still had a good number of those. So now it appears those flu cases have been rolled in to COVID cases. Again, a coronavirus is a coronavirus. The book 1984, something I had to read as a sophomore in high school. Thank you, Coach Wilson. George Orwell, everything other than working was forbidden. Walking in the streets, having fun, singing, dancing, getting together, everything was forbidden. All right. And what we do as we try to look at disclosure, and this is just a beginning, there's so many other topics. Healthcare, I think, is the next aspect of disclosure that will bring the greatest change to humanity. The monetary system probably one, but I think healthcare is the big one, since we face that with this healthcare crisis. And just by the way we have been living, with the food we've been eating, with the environmental pollutions that we have been inundated with for generations now, healthcare is a big thing. So this is especially so when one feels that they have gotten the whole story. The hardest part of prison is to escape our own mind. And when a person's exploration, research, curiosity ceases, and for them the storybook is now closed, that can only mean that the journey of discovery ends. This, then by definition, cuts them off from any further expansion. Nothing ends a journey like saying, I have arrived. So we're kind of to the point where we're realizing, recognizing, talking about it with each other. The Extinction Rebellion movement has a place. Not that we're not all aware of these crises issues, but just how close to the edge of the cliff we are finding ourselves. So when the earth is ravaged and the animals are dying, a new tribe of people shall come into the earth from many colors, classes, creeds, and who by their actions and deeds shall make the earth green again. They will be known as the warriors of the rainbow. And that could be rolled into the Great Awakening, because until we understand, recognize, and can identify those which have kept these technologies, this knowledge, this way of living from us, we won't know how and what to change. So sometimes you can't tell the public the truth. You must show them the truth. Only then people will find the courage to change. Crimes against children unite humanity across all party lines. These will be difficult truths for us all to digest. So I'll ask again, which truths will we hold on to rather than letting go as new information arrives? New information that will require integration, new information so we can think, interact, and forge a very different future than the one the past has brought us to. So these are some other shows that we've got here on Metadime. Coffee Break Show with Vicky coming up at every weekday at 11 Mountain. Tracy's Unlocked Show airs at this time, 6 o'clock Tuesdays and Thursdays, and then another perspective, my Monday, Wednesday, 6 p.m. show. I'm going to come over here so I can talk to you guys. And wow, Greenhouses and Cities, right, Don? Martin, does Jesus in the Second Coming? That's the show. I talked about that in my show, The Greatest Secret. I think there are two things that will be very, very important in the coming days, weeks, or months. And it's either the revelation of our brothers from the skies and a second coming. And I don't know how they could not be intertwined to some degree. Because once humanity recognizes the mess we're in and karmically chooses to live and exist in a different way, that opens up the potential for other help. Help that may have been here just disguised and hidden, dimensional help, or even the brothers that just pass on by, like, oh, they care enough about themselves to pick up the trash, to use something other than a polluting energy source. And then with that, then we're receptive and can benefit from what Jean-Luc Picard and was in Star Trek was a prime directive. If you don't interfere unless they're ready to be warp capable. And I'm going to suggest, and if not say outright, that we are warp capable and have been for some time. And this process of disclosure is bringing people closer and closer to that introduction of what's out there, because we have been a warp capable civilization for a period of time. Now, will we have, if Eisenhower is right, if some of these stories that are the better part of 50, 60 years old, that we chose not to let go of technologies to then receive other technologies, we didn't give up the destructive ones to receive the constructive ones. And maybe after another 70 years and 3 generations have passed, the trials that we have put this planet through, we have put each other through, are drawing to a close, that we realize the end of the road is here. We've got a fork. And if we can choose one by one, but then together to live a different way, that help can show up, and that help can karmically assist us where previously, 50 years ago, it chose not to. And now we would be in a place where we would willingly receive. Good to see you guys on there. Ryan, great show. It's something that feels really, really important to me. And at the top of the show, I think there's a massive data dump coming, and it's going to blow a lot of people out. They don't realize that the world they've been living in is a Truman Show, literally a Truman Show. All right, guys, we'll continue this discussion on Wednesday. We've got health things and other technologies that I believe we all need to be exposed to prior to being exposed to them. All right, have a great night, and I'll catch you tomorrow at 5 o'clock for the weather, and then Wednesday for this, another episode of Another Perspective. Good to see you on there, and thanks for participating. Have a great night, and in the meantime, keep looking up.